Let's talk about measure of spread and measure of central tendency. Let's look at the following scenario. Question 1, it says the data below shows the number of laptops sold by 15 sales agents during the financial year. So that's a critical piece of information. The number of elements in the data set is 15. So let's have a look at 1.1. It says determine the median of the number of laptops sold. We all know that the median is represented by Q subscript 2. That stands for the median. And just remember, median is an example of a measure of central tendency. It speaks to the middlemost number in the data set. So very important is to rearrange the data set in ascending order. That would be from the smallest to the biggest. So let me quickly arrange the data set, and this is normally the way in which I would do this. Just take any color of your choice, underline all the 40s and arrange them in ascending order. So from the 40s there, it's quite clear that the first the first data element, okay, wait, we have 30s here as well. So let's arrange the 30s in ascending order. 34, 37, those are the only two, so we write them down. It's more of like eliminating to make the data set smaller. 34, 37, and then in the 40 range of numbers, yeah, I think those are the only numbers in the 40s. So the first one is 43, 46, 48, 48. I think that's the mode of the data set, right? And you do the same for the rest of the elements in the data set. So from the data set provided, we need to find the position of the median. So there's a formula that we use to find the position, and the formula is as follows. The position of Q2, remember Q2 stands for the median. The position of Q2 quartile 2 is equals to the number of elements in the dataset plus 1 divided by 2, and there's 15 elements, plus 1 divided by 2, so that's 16 divided by 2. So position 8 is where the second quartile is. That is the median, right? So it's good to mark it down on the data set. So you can even count from left to right. 8 positions from the left and 8 positions from the right will bring you to 54. So the middlemost element in the data set is 54, right? So the quartile 2 or the median is equals to 54. Okay, that was a very straightforward question. Let's have a look at 1.2. So in 1.2 they want us to calculate the range of the data. So it's very straightforward. Just find the highest value, the lowest value, and find the difference between the two. So the range is the highest value minus the lowest value, and the highest value in this case is 90, minus 34, which gives us 56. It was quite easy. Let's have a look at the quartile. Calculate. Let's look at 1.3. In 1.3 they want us to calculate the interquartile range, IQR. So that would mean we have to find the first quartile and the third quartile in the data set. So there are formulas for that. The position of the first quartile is the number of elements a quarter of the number of elements plus 1. A quarter of the number of elements in the data set plus 1, which is a quarter of 15 plus 1, which is equals to a quarter of 16, and a quarter of 16 is 4. So at position 4 we find the first quartile, and it's good to mark it down on the data set, right? So the first quartile, Q1, is positioned at 46. So let's mark it there. Let's mark it on the data set. But let's first let's go look for the third quartile. That's 12, right? So let's mark, remember the third quartile is just 3/4 of the total number of elements plus 1, which gives us 12. So let's mark Q1 and Q3. It's important that to locate these quartiles, we are familiar with the formulae for finding the positions of the quartiles, right? And the interquartile range gives us an indication of the dispersion or the spread of the data set. So the interquartile range, interquartile is equals to Q3 minus Q1, and Q3 is equals to 73 minus 46, which would give us 27. And finally, the last question, it says we should draw a box and whisker diagram for the data above. Some people call it a whisker diagram. So a box and whisker diagram just gives us a 5-point summary of the data set. So important is to use a scale. In this case, I think the preferred scale would be in steps of 10, starting from 30, or from 10, right, all the way to 90. But when you guys draw, just make sure you use instruments. I'm just drawing freehand for the sake of explanation purposes. You do this until you get to 90, right? And when you just mark off the 5 points, the 5 critical points, it's the lower value, the higher value, the quartiles 1, 2, 3. The 3 quartiles actually form the box, and the lower value and the higher value form the whiskers, or the whiskers. I call them whiskers. That's the way you remember it. Just it's formed by 5 critical points that summarize the data, right? So the lowest value would be 30. There's it there with a dot. I mark it with a dot. Some people use a line, but you can use a dot. It will all depend. And 90 is there, the highest value. And we draw a line for 54 is the middle quartile, Q2, or the median. You do the same. You draw a line for the lower quartile, which is Q1, right? You just mark it, and you draw a line for the upper quartile, which is Q3, and these 3 lines form your box. You just join them together and draw your box like that, right? And then just add the whiskers to the box, and there's the other one. So that's how your box and whisker diagram looks. What I normally do is I mark all the critical points on the box and whisker diagram so that the representation is clear It's always wise to do this so that whoever's examining your scripts get a clear indication of where your 5-point summary is.